Welcome back to Why the Catholic Church is the One True Church, Part 2. Today we'll be talking about the Church and more specifically the Pope's authority. So let's hop right into it. First, we'll be reading from Matthew 18, verse 15 through 17. It says, "If your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault, between you and him alone. If he listens to you, you have gained your brother. But if he does not listen, take one or two others along with you, that every word may be confirmed by the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. If he refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if he refuses to listen to even the church, let him be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector." They are rejecting whatever church was established by Jesus. Now, that is where the question arises. What church was it? What type of church is being described here? And what church has this massive authority? We read, "If I am delayed, you may know how one ought to behave in the household of God, which is the church of the living God, the pillar and bulwark of truth." 1 Timothy 3, verse 15. It says here that the church of God is the pillar of truth itself. So if you do not have the right church, boy, oh boy, you do not want to be in that situation. So here's that question again. Which church has this authority? Now, if you are a Protestant, do you really think that your church that you're attending is the pillar of truth itself? Is this something you're willing to confirm? Now, a lot of people say, including me at one point, oh no, the church is just the bodies of believers, not a specific building or specific denomination. Now, think about that statement in the light of the passages we just read. Let's take, for example, a Baptist church and a Presbyterian church. Let's say the Baptist church is saying one thing about the Eucharist and the Presbyterian church is saying a completely different thing about the Eucharist, about the same thing, the same topic. It doesn't have to be anything specific. Okay, well, if the body of believers is supposed to be the pillar and foundation of truth, which of these is the true church? Because they're both bodies of believers. You need to choose a denomination. That is why the phrase, "your denomination doesn't matter," is false. Now, I'm not saying one denomination is going to be in heaven. That's not at all what I'm saying. But I am saying that it is better for you to look at which denomination you think is the pillar of truth itself. Because if you have the wrong one, it is much easier for you to be led astray and led away from Christ. One has to be the correct church. One has to be the correct denomination. And this church and denomination is the one that all Christians should go to. It's the one that has the ability, like we read in Matthew 18, to determine whether or not someone is in right standing with God. So this church must be unitive, authoritative, and must be widespread. Now let's talk about what the structure of the church is. If you don't know, Catholics believe in the Pope, somebody who is anointed by God to spread interpretation of the Bible. Not new revelation, but rather how we understand what biblical passages are saying. We believe that there is one leader over the rest of Christianity. Now, let's take a look at some verses that support this, like Matthew 16. It says, "And Jesus answered him, 'Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the powers of death shall not prevail against it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you lose on earth shall be lost in heaven.'" Matthew 16, verse 17 through 19. Now, Peter, if you did not know already, means rock, and Jesus changed his name to Peter, which, again, it means rock. And he says he will establish his church on this rock, Peter, and give him the keys to heaven, a phrase only said ever to Peter in the Bible. Peter is considered the first pope ever, and this is why it says whatever Peter binds on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever he loses on earth will be lost in heaven, meaning he has given him authority to open and close access to the kingdom of heaven. Again, this is very important. I'm not just talking about a pastor leading a congregation. Remember, there weren't a bunch of different churches all with their own Peter. No, it was a bunch of different churches all submitting to Peter, who was the rock and who was the keys to the kingdom of heaven. Even if there's a bunch of different Catholic churches around the world, a bunch of different parishes, but we're all united as one church under Peter. This is a very, very important passage. The next verses we will read come from Matthew 17. This is where we see Peter actually enacting on the power that Jesus gave him. This is him using the power of being the leader of the rest of the apostles. It says, When they came to Capernaum, the collectors of the half-shekel tax, went up to Peter and said, "Does not your teacher pay the tax?" He said, "Yes." And when he came home, Jesus spoke to him first, saying, "What do you think, Simon? From whom do kings of the earth take toll or tribute? From their sins or from others?" Matthew 17, verse 23 through 25. Now, something to take note of is that this English translation does not encapsulate everything going on in the Greek text. The Greek phrase "went up to Peter" is more like they went to the head speaker. Peter. They went to the primary speaker, which is Peter. So we're seeing again that Peter is the leader of the church here, okay? And they go up to him specifically with a question about Jesus. Now, why just Peter? The other apostles are there, right? So remember, they came to Capernaum, not just Peter. But they go to Peter first and they ask him, and Peter does something unbelievable here. Something that I can't comprehend how important it is. And you can't even comprehend how important it is. Something no one in the entire New Testament ever does. He speaks on behalf of Christ, fully, plainly, in just one word. They ask, "Does not your teacher pay the tax?" And he responds, "Yes." So what's being shown here is that Peter, the leader of the apostles, appointed by Jesus himself, has the authority to speak on behalf of Christ. This is so important. Look what happens after that. And when he came home, Jesus spoke to him first. This means Jesus really wasn't there during that dialogue. So Peter was so confident in his authority, in his ability to lead, that he was willing to speak on behalf of Jesus. Now we're going to continue seeing this authority being used and appointed to him throughout these next verses. We're going next to John 21, which is longer but very important, so please read it. Afterward, Jesus appeared again to his disciples by the Sea of Galilee. It happened this way: Simon Peter, Thomas, all known as Didymus, I think that's how you pronounce it, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, the two other disciples were together. "I am going out to fish," Simon Peter told them. And they said, "We'll go with you." So they went out and got into the boat. But that night they caught nothing. Early in the morning, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples did not realize that it was Jesus. He called out to them, "Friends, haven't you any fish?" "No," they answered. He said, "Throw your net on the right side of the boat and you will find some." When they did, they were unable to haul the net in because of the large number of fish. Then the disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, It is the Lord." As soon as Simon Peter heard him say, "It is the Lord," he wrapped his outer garment around him, for he had taken it off, and jumped into the water. The other disciples followed in the boat, towing the net full of fish, for they were not far from shore, but 100 yards. When they landed, they saw a fire of burning coals there with fish on it, and some bread. Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish you have just caught." So Simon Peter climbed back into the boat and dragged the net ashore. It was full of large fish, 153 to be exact. But even with so many, the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, "Come and have breakfast." None of the disciples dared ask him, "Who are you?" They knew it was the Lord. Jesus came, took the bread and gave it to them, and did the same with the fish. This was now the third time Jesus appeared to his disciples after he was raised from the dead. When they had finished eating, Jesus had said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" "Yes, Lord," he said. "You know that I love you." Jesus said, "Feed my lambs." Again, Jesus said, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He answered, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said, "Take care of my sheep." The third time he said to him, "Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me?" Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him the third time, "Do you love me?" He said, "Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you." Jesus said, "Feed my sheep." John 21, verse 1 through 17. Now get ready for why this is so important. The context of this fishing scene. Which is very important because if we remember, the apostles were told by Jesus, they will be fishers of men. Meaning when Peter said he was going fishing, it was not literal. It's a reference back to the fact that the church is going to be fishing for men, bringing people to salvation. And Simon Peter is the one that leads the rest of the apostles. It's very important to note. And so they're out there fishing, and Jesus stands on the beach, and he asks if they have caught any fish. Have they brought any disciples to the church? And look what happens. When they catch a bunch of fish because of this miracle that Jesus performs, he says, "Cast it over the side and pull up your fish." There's a bunch of fish that are pulled up in the net. And look what happens. When Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his clothes, where he was stripped for work, and he sprang into the sea. But the other disciples came in the boat, dragging the net full of fish, for they were not far from the land, but about 100 yards off. They bring the fish by Jesus' command. Bring the fish that you have just caught. That's crazy. Jesus is asking for the fish that the apostles, the men who are being brought to salvation, he's asking them to be presented to him. So Simon Peter goes aboard, and he hauls the net ashore full of large fish, 153 of them. And although there were so many, the net was not torn. That word right there, used for torn, is schismato, or ekiste. Ekiste is actually where we get the word schism. And if you don't know about church history, the Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church were once united. One church. Then in 1054, they schismed. They broke away. But that is not what we're seeing in this passage. In fact, it's the opposite. When Peter is presenting the flock, presenting God's people to Jesus, as long as Peter is there bringing the net, it will not tear. It will not schism. The church will be fully united as long as Peter is there. That's very, very important, but it gets crazier. When they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord, he said. You know that I love you. Jesus said, feed my lambs. Now, who are Jesus' lambs? God's people. So Peter is being told, and Peter alone is being told, that he is the new shepherd of the flock. We know Jesus is the good shepherd. We know he's the good shepherd. So while Jesus is away, while Jesus ascends into heaven, he wants Peter to be the one that takes care of the church. And he doesn't just say it once. He says it again, tend my sheep, and finally, one last time, feed my sheep. That is abundantly important. We will never fully understand how important that is. I don't even understand the fullness of what's being said here at all. I really don't. But all we need to know is that Jesus is the good shepherd. He is the one that takes care of the sheep, and he is appointing a mere human being on earth to do that job for him. And that is the papacy exactly, to the minute detail. That is what the Pope does. He feeds the lambs and tends and feeds the sheep. Now you might say, this is given to all the apostles, right? This is given to my pastor in my Baptist church. No, it is not. It is not given to them. It's only given to Peter. It's not given to any other apostle. It's given to one man. Even though the other apostles are there, we have to have one person leading the church. But it gets crazier. Hold on to your seats. Generally, we see in Acts 15 that Peter actually enacts the authority and shows unequivocally that he is the leader of the church. We read in Acts 15:5 that the apostles and the Judaizers do we still need to make circumcision necessary for the Christians. This is how the dialogue goes. Then some of the believers who belonged to the party of the Pharisees stood up and said, the Gentiles must be circumcised and required to keep the law of Moses. The apostles and the elders met to consider the question. So the entire church now was gathered and saying, okay, is this something that's necessary? If you were expecting to see a leader of the church, what would the leader do? What would he do? He would stand up here and say, this is the truth. He'd say, you guys, just trust me on this one, okay? That's what he said. And they recognized his authority. What would we expect the church to do if there was a leader? They would listen to what he says because, they recognize his authority. Let's see what they say. After much discussion, Peter got up and addressed them. Brothers, you know that some time ago God made a choice among you that the Gentiles might hear from my lips the message of the gospel and believe. Whoa. He says God chose that by Peter's mouth he would be able to spread the gospel. So not only is Peter standing up, but if you read verse 12, the whole assembly became silent as they listened to Barnabas and Paul telling about the signs and wonders God had done among the Gentiles through them. When they finished, James spoke up. Brothers, he said, listen to me. Simon has described to us how God first intervened to choose a people for his name from the Gentiles. Not only did James reassure the words that Peter said, the entire assembly became silent. Entire assembly became silent. If that's not a one true leader of the church, I don't know what is. I genuinely don't. Let's go back to 1 Timothy 3:15, where it says, the church Christ started is the pillar and bulwark of the truth. That's why this is so important. That's why I'm so passionate. There can only be one church that is united, true, and led by one leader. There can only be one, which is why I'm so passionate on this topic and making this series. And that's the Catholic Church. Nobody else is the Pope. So if you're convicted by all of this, come to the Catholic Church. Come home. Come to the Pope. Come to the leader that Christ told, feed my sheep, lead my sheep, tend to my sheep. If you believe and can trust that God appointed the Pope, then you can trust whatever else the Catholic Church says, because that's really what everything hinges on. It says that the gates of hell will not prevail on it. So the core teachings of the church cannot and will not break. They will not fold. Doesn't mean you can't have questions. In fact, questions are encouraged. Questions are good. But this is seriously important. If you are not convicted yet, then don't worry, because I've only covered Mary and the church's authority. If you have any other problems, trust me, they'll be covered over the following days. There's still plenty of time to have your concerns lifted and convert to the true church. I can say with 100% honesty that this is what happened to me. The more you think, the more Catholicism just makes sense, guys. Catholicism makes sense and starts becoming the real true denomination in church. And no, not all Catholics will make it to heaven. Again, I don't believe that all Catholics will make it to heaven. I don't believe that all non-Catholics won't make it to heaven. But being closer to Catholicism, I do believe makes it easier to follow Jesus, and it makes it easier not to stray away, because the Catholic Church is the pillar of truth. If you are with the pillar of truth, then you hold to that truth, then you will go to heaven. I'm not saying everyone in the Catholic Church will, because some people just can't hold to that truth for some reason. And I'm not saying people outside of the Catholic Church can't hold to that truth either, or have true faith. But the fact is that the Catholic Church, based off of everything that I've just pointed out, is the true and first church that Jesus Christ established through Peter, Simon Bar-Jonah. Thank you guys. God bless, and have a great day, and bye.